Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the Psych Monologues. And no, I am not doing this a day late just to irritate the perfectionists in the crowd. I was up to my eyeballs in alligators with grading last night, and I decided I was going to kick it in and guts it out to get as much done as I could and delay this by a day. So here we are, and welcome. I'm glad you took a little time out of your day to listen in. The Psych Monologues is a podcast that explores the intersection of faith, psychology, and spiritual formation. Today is November 2nd. I was supposed to start this yesterday on November 1st, which would have been the initiation of a brand new month, but be that as it may, here we are. So pull up a chair, get comfortable, relax. I want to talk about something that has been niggling in the back of my mind. I don't, whatever that means. I think everybody kind of knows, but nobody ever defines it. But the question is this that has been percolating in my mind of late, and that is, why are we so afraid of being known in spite of the fact that we long to be known? I mean, I think this is true for most humans. I want to be seen. I want to be known. And yet, we do all sorts of things to create barriers to that very thing. And this has a profound impact on our spiritual formation because, of course, when it comes to relating to God, I think most people would say, yeah, I know God knows everything about me. And sometimes they go so far as to say, God knows everything about me, therefore why do I have anything to say to him? But at the same time, what I would propose is that there's a lot of things that we do in our human relationships that have a direct impact on our spiritual relationship with God. And so as I've thought more and more about this, there were a number of things that kind of jumped out at me. And let me give you a little bit of a background here, okay? One of the things that I do that my students love to hate and then end up, after they leave CCU, look back on it fondly, and you know you do, some of you who are out there listening to me, is I ask them to journal. And it's very undefined. It is an invitation. Yes, they get points for it, so you can say, well, it's not really an invitation if there's points for it, blah, 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 whatever. But it's to share with me the things, the questions that they have, the things that they're wrestling with, the things that are percolating up in their mind that are related to the things that I often say in class. And so I have these journals that I am honored, and I'm not overstating this. I really am not. But I am honored and humbled at the courage that is shown by students who are willing to share their life with me in the way that they do through their journals. And there's a lot that I learned there. And quite honestly, it has a direct impact on the things that I talk about in class, which can make class very uncomfortable. I mean, it would be a little bit like going to church and you sharing your journal with your pastor, and your pastor gets up and makes direct comments, not specific to you, but specific enough to let you know that that person has read the comments and the things that you put in your journal. And that's very, very intrusive. I know it is. But at the same time, it allows me to take the material that I'm teaching and make it very specific to the people that I am talking to. And quite honestly, I think the Holy Spirit uses that in very profound and powerful ways. And it's not because I'm saying it, but it's because of what I know and how I use it to inform how I teach. So there's a number of themes that have come up of late about this very thing that has that's the question I'm posing, is that we're so afraid of being known in spite of the fact that we long to be known, to be seen, and so forth. So there are 2 or 3 things that I want to highlight just for your consideration. And the first thing is this assertion, is being known and being hurt. And the thing that comes to my mind is that if I can be known, I can be hurt, which explains why I create all sorts of barriers and things that get in the way of being known. Now, many moons ago, I used to work with adolescents in the hospital in an inpatient setting. And oftentimes I would ask them to draw me a picture of their hearts and what it would look like. And it was always fascinating. I still have students do this on occasion, but it was always fascinating. There was one guy I still remember very vividly. I brought in a bunch of butcher block paper, put it on the floor, gave him, markers and so forth, said, go at it. Show me what is on your heart. Now, the way that I translated that for these adolescents was what is on the wall that you use to protect yourself from other people. And they went to it, man. They were all in, all the way into detail and everything else. And with this particular guy that I still remember very vividly, had a wall, and he actually portrayed the wall on the outside and then on the inside of what he saw. And on the outside of that wall, it wasn't so much what he put on the outside, but all of the barriers he created for anybody making any attempt to get to him. And the way he portrayed it was there was a moat. There were alligators in that moat, man-eating, of course. There was broken glass across the top of that wall with guard dogs patrolling up there. And he actually went so far as to make kind of a bird's eye view of it. And what ended up showing up was not only was there a wall, but getting through, if you were able to get through the drawbridge gate that led up to the wall, if you got through that, there was an entire maze on the other side, and all the way inside of that maze was him. And I said at the time, and this is, like I said, a long time ago, I said at the time, nobody but Indiana Jones could get to you. And he got this kind of smirk on his face, and he said, exactly. And I wonder how much that is like us. Now, the other part of his wall was what was on the inside. And he managed to put on the inside all sorts of things on the blocks of the wall that were things that he believed about himself. And it was loser and awkward and depressed and angry and, uncomfortable, all sorts of things that were on there, which he looked at on a regular basis. And so what was his wall for? It was to prevent getting hurt. Because after all, if anybody gets to me, I will get hurt again. And how often does that happen in our relationships with one another? In spite of our longing to be known, we have erected all sorts of barriers and tests and other things just to make sure, absolutely sure, that the person that is making it through it is worthy of knowing us and potentially hurting us. See, we use the word vulnerable, and vulnerable literally means the capacity to be wounded. So our assumption ends up becoming one of, if I'm known, I will be hurt. Now, there's another one. There's another one. And the next one is if I am known, I can be betrayed. So if we allow ourselves to be known, the information can be used against me. Now notice all of these are all if-then statements. If I'm known, then I'm betrayed. If I'm known, I will be hurt. If I'm known, I will be alone. And see, we continue to create these if-then scenarios in order to keep ourselves safe. So the only way, really, to be able to manage this dissonance, this disconnect in our hearts, is to say, yes, I want to be known as an abstract belief that I hold, but I will do everything I can to make sure that I'm never hurt again, that I'm never betrayed again, that I'm never left alone again. Even if I am isolating myself, I will do everything in my power to make it so that I do that, somebody else doesn't do that. And so our prediction powers, our predictive powers are in full force, because being known and being hurt go together, and being betrayed and being known go together. And there's one other thing that I would mention, and that is losing control over the information about us. I just spent the day talking about control and the thoughts that we hold about control, and how much of our efforts to manage access to ourselves is not only to make sure that we're not hurt, but also to manage our image, how people see us, the perceptions they have of us. Now, the strange twist in all of that is I believe I can know what other people think and conclude about me. And where do I get my clues? Well, I'll tell you one place you don't get your clues. You don't conduct a poll and say, so how do you perceive me? We don't do that. We don't want to do that. Really? No, we were not going to do that. That's too, I quite honestly, I'm not sure I even want that information, because I'm not sure which is worse, to have somebody say something that confirms what I already believe, or to have somebody say something that doesn't confirm it and actually conveys a sense of acceptance for who I am as I am, with no conditions. Actually, that ends up being far more frightening. So being known and being hurt, being betrayed and being hurt, being betrayed and being known, and losing control over the effort that we make in terms of image management. Now, let me give you another example. I had this actually happen. One of the journals that a student wrote, and the student put a note in the journal that said that I am sharing a deep part of myself, and I would ask that it would be handled with care and with tenderness. Fair enough. I'd much rather have somebody actually say that to me. But the thing to pay attention is that in some sense, the student was trying to manage my response to them rather than take the risk. And again, this connects up with our own spiritual formation. This is this intersection that I talk about of psychology and faith and spiritual formation, because they can't be divorced from one another. My psychology, the things that I conclude about myself, how I operate, how I make my decisions, all of those things have a direct impact on how I engage my spiritual formation and where I am in even that process. Because in a lot of cases, as Blaise Pascal famously once said, God made man in his own image and man returned the favor. And so we worship or even interact in our spiritual formation with a God of our own creating. And that God not the one in Scripture that is portrayed through Jesus. That God is every bit as cranky and fussy and detail-oriented and ruthless and demanding and condemning as I am. Now, we blur the lines, obviously, between me and God in that case. But we really don't make that conclusion, and that's why oftentimes we get trapped into this, yes, I want to be known, but I'm not willing to take the risk to actually being known because we're afraid of what others might think of us, or that they think about us the way we do. Now, is there, and to some degree, whenever I go down this path and I talk about these things, I sense because I've done this enough and I've talked to people in counseling for a long time, that sooner or later the question begins to bubble to the surface. Okay, you've got me. I agree. I am in that camp. So how do I get out of this? Now, let's be really clear, shall we? Are we asking, how do I get out of this, to find that the answer that is provided us we don't like and we're going to stay where we are? Are we asking, how do I get out of this? And if you can't give me a 12-step proposal in terms of how to do this, I'm tapping out and continuing on the path that I'm already on? Or are we asking, how do I do this so that I can control the process? And I can go at the speed and understand and engage it in such a way that I can hedge my bets against doing it wrong. And this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in. Because how do I get out of this state? And there are a couple different conditions that we have to confront. The first one is removing risk. Not reducing risk, but removing risk. And the one thing I know, and I make this assertion, and I'm sure the students out there that are listening to me will roll their eyes because they're tired of hearing me say this all the time, trust and control cannot coexist. Trust and risk always coexist. So if we're removing risk, we're removing the possibility of trust. And we're also setting up the conditions to going back to image management, sin management, and just doing the right thing and hoping that that gets us to where we want to go. Now, let me say one other thing about this, and that is, it is not shameworthy to not want to be betrayed. It is not shameworthy to avoid getting hurt. I am not saying that at all. It is built into our systems to remove risk because we have a long and checkered history with probably being hurt or being betrayed or being known, at least we thought it was being known, and then it being used against us. That history is entirely valid and entirely compelling to continue on the path that we're on. On the other hand, the question has to be asked, how well is this working for us? We stay committed to a path, a strategy that isolates us, and at the same time, we bemoan the fact of how alone we feel. And count me in. I do that. And I talk to a lot of people over the 4 decades of me talking to people that have done that. And it's like we despair of ever finding the kind of relationship that will be trustworthy enough for me to allow myself to be known. And so we're in a terrible dilemma. We're in a double bind. If I move toward this thing, I might get hurt. if I move away from this thing about being known, if I move away from it, I will be alone. That's a terrible dilemma. So on the one hand, I get hurt. On the other, I'll be alone. Well, at least I'll be alone and not hurt. Really? Really? See, there's another part of this that I think we have to contend with. And that is the idea of, I want to be known. The dilemma that we face is, how well do I know myself? Because I can't give away what I don't know. And so often, we have not spent enough time doing what I often call walking the landscape of my heart to see what is there, things that are frightening, things that I condemn and hate, that I have cordoned off and said, nope, that is not showing up anywhere, or the things that I put forward in order for people to pay attention to, applaud me, or do whatever, in order to really take attention away from these areas that I have condemned. And remember, as crazy as it sounds, we do that with God. Again, it's one of those things where I can espouse a belief, but not own that belief and not do anything about that belief. That's the world that we live in now. I don't have any dog in the fight, if you will. I can have the belief that, yes, it's good to be known, but that's it. I don't invest any action into it. I just say, yeah, it's good to be known. But I don't do any investing in that. And there are a couple different sticking points. If I want to move toward being known by trustworthy and safe people, and those two characteristics are key. Because how do I know trustworthy people? By what they do. Brene Brown makes a famous metaphor in her book, Daring Greatly, and that is of, imagine that our trust bank is like a mason jar, and the person we're in relationship with that does and acts trustworthy, we drop a marble into it, and as the marbles begin to grow, the more trustworthy that person becomes. And when they are human and do things out of selfish intent or whatever else, or betray a trust or whatever, we take marbles out. That's a natural dynamic in relationships. But trust is not earned quickly. But when it is earned, it is there for us to depend on. So it would be idiotic of me to invest in somebody, in a relationship, or share something with somebody who has not demonstrated that they can be trustworthy. And just remember something, I can't share somebody into being trustworthy. I can't be in a relationship and kind of make the person into being trustworthy and then say, oh, now I finally have somebody who's trustworthy or worthy of my trust. And I've seen that happen time and time again. It's like, I hope that they can be trustworthy, so I'm going to share this. But that's not going to make them trustworthy. If I don't have any evidence, then why am I even bothering doing that, other than that I'm building something on a hope that has no evidence behind it. And I have no history. I have no indications that the person will act in a trusting way. So there's that. And then the other part of that is safe. And what is safe? It's not just somebody who keeps a confidence or who's confidential with me and keeps my secrets and doesn't, gossip and tell other people about it or anything else. It's certainly part of that. But a lot of times, safe people, because you're never going to meet somebody who is 100% safe. And the other part of that is it's key in terms of how do you define what safe is. Safe for what? And so, in spite of the fact that I'm never going to find somebody who's 100% safe, I'm going to find some people in my life who are safe in certain areas and not in others. And just because somebody is a family member doesn't make them safe. Let me have it be said very clearly. And just because somebody's a Christian doesn't make them safe either. So I have to exercise discernment in the nature of the person that I am interacting with. So can I move into relationships and be known? And the answer is yes. It will always involve risk. It will always involve discerning the nature of the person I am in relationship with. Are there times where I risk it and it doesn't work out? Yes. But that information I gain from it, in spite of the hurt that I feel, the information I gain from it is pretty valuable information about my next times of trusting them or whatever. And that's what's key here to allowing ourselves to be known. The last point that has to be said in terms of our spiritual formation is I want to be known by God. How do I do that with a spirit being? But some of that has to do with opening our eyes to a larger universe that we are in, where God is always busy, always moving, and bringing a variety of people into our worlds that whispers into our ear, I love you just the way you are. Not as you should be, because you're never going to be what you should be. So come to me as you are and experience the kind of love that I can offer you through other people and through the things that I demonstrate to you, whether it's in the Word and the Word of God that opens up the heart of God to us. And I think it needs to be said, it's harder to see that clearly in the Old Testament. It's really hard to see. I understand that. But even if you were to focus on seeing Jesus as he is portrayed in the pages of the Gospels, and not engaging him with an already framed understanding of what we think he is, then maybe his words start to resonate in my heart of, oh yeah, actually he does know me pretty well. It may be through people's stories. It may be a variety of people. There is an entire parade of people that walk through the pages of the Gospels, interacting with Jesus, and I dare you to not be able to find one person in there, if you think deeply enough about the issues that they bring into their relationship with Jesus, that it doesn't connect with where you're at. Whether that's trying to look better than we are, like the rich young ruler, and saying, I've kept all the commandments, or the woman that is so filled with shame over a physical problem. She had a hemorrhage. She was hemorrhaging for 12 years. Could she do anything about it? No, not at all. But she was so shame-filled because she was marginalized by society, by her culture, that she couldn't even engage Jesus in a conversation. She had reduced her interaction with him to simply touching him. And when we start thinking about this a little bit more humanly, we will begin to find out that in the face of Jesus, we find, one, being known, and two, being loved as we are. And that is the launching point to becoming fully what we were created to be. And that is the basis of spiritual formation. So, Are we afraid of being known? Yes, we are. Let's just call it for what it is. Do I want to be known? Yes, I do. Do I find every reason to avoid being known? Yes, I do. But there is a way out, and it requires something from us that we all have to ask ourselves the question, am I willing to take this kind of risk and do the discerning of character that I need to do with the people around me who can show me the face of Jesus? I had a young client, and I'll end on this, but I had a young client back in the days when I did play therapy and talking to kids and interacting with their world through that medium. And, we were talking about something that she had set up in the sand tray. And there was one figure there that she had referred to as Jesus. And I said, why do you like that so much? Why? And it's like, what she said is I just need Jesus with skin on. And that's what we can be for one another. We do it in a flawed way. We make mistakes. But if we can divorce ourselves and pull away from all the shame that we tend to pile on in terms of being perfect and doing it the right way and always saying the right thing and providing the truth and all those sorts of things, and simply enter into another person's world, and they walk away feeling just a little more known than we have reflected the heart of Jesus to someone else. And that's what we're talking about. That's why spiritual formation is not about an individual journey. It's about a shared journey. And then we can confront our incredible, powerful drive to control everything around us so that we don't experience any risk and we also don't experience any hurt. And that's not an insane thing to want. It's to not be hurt. But there is sorrow and there is joy. And sorrow gains meaning from joy. And joy gains meaning from sorrow. If we remove all of the negatives out of our lives, then our lives flatline and lose their depth. And we lose our depth. And so, what will you choose? In what direction will you go in your relationships with people in the future? We can all affirm the fact that we want to be known. How many barriers do I create to get in the way of being known? And maybe I can link arms with other people who are trying to break this kind of dilemma that we're in, this double bind that we're in, so that we can actually have the kind of community, the kind of ability to be known as we are in remarkable ways. And quite honestly, I'll say this to you before I end, and that is, that kind of community I want to be a part of. And that kind of community is what the world around us is longing for, but have simply given up hope that they can ever gain it. But we can drive toward that. I mean, we can move toward that. And it always comes back to taking the time to know ourselves enough so that we have something to share with others. And that's a dynamic relationship. That's a dynamic community. I would even go so far as to say is that community is what creates a context for redemption. So there you have it. End of program. I have a few things just to remind you of, as I always do, around the psych monologues. Please DM me with your questions on Instagram. We're getting a little bit more consistent in posting the episode on Instagram and other places. You can follow us and do subscriptions on the website and sign up for Keep in Touch. or the subscriptions through a variety of social media networks that you may be a part of. Instagram, we can be found at the Psych Monologues, Facebook, Ray.Mitch, and LinkedIn, Dr. Mitch. Any one of those, you can subscribe through Apple Podcasts and any of the places where you find your or you consume podcasts. So that includes Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, Podbean, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio, anywhere that you want to find that. Or you can go straight to the website at drmitch.com and go to the page set aside for the podcast, and you can listen to them in serial order if you would like. I've been doing this for about a year and a half. Next year would be 2 years. We are coming up on our 100th podcast, which is just phenomenal since this is number 82. And so you can find us anywhere and subscribe. If it's enjoyable, if you like it, if you want to help us get the word out about what I'm doing here with this podcast, leave a review. That allows more people to hear about it and listen in for whatever we're doing. The other thing that is important, very important to me in doing this podcast at all, is providing content that you find valuable enough to invest in partnering with us to continue to grow our scholarship fund that allows us to put on and lead, for me to lead, the silent retreats. And my bigger hope was that the silent retreats can be more than just for CCU students, but at this point, what I want you to realize is that the investment in partnering with us for this scholarships fund to make these silent retreats possible is our investment into the next generation. And during the last podcast, I made mention of the fact that this generation, millennials and the Z generations, are leaving the church in droves because they can't find anything real in the church anymore. And whether or not you agree with that assessment, we have to find some way to meet them where they are. And that's what this podcast really is all about. So you can partner with us for your tax-deductible gifts for the CCU Silent Retreats. You can go to the page on the web or on my website and just click on CCU in the drop-down menu to the Silent Retreats. There's a donation button at the bottom. You can make a one-time donation. You can make a continuing donation, which either one, anything at all, would make a world of difference in being able to offer the Silent Retreats to students at CCU right now. I would certainly love to see it broaden to other universities. So you can do that. The end of the year is coming up, and if you're considering where to invest your money in terms of the next generation, please consider us and do that there. If you would rather do it through check, you can certainly do that by making your check out to 1615.tv. That is our fiscal sponsor. And you can also address the envelope with the check to 1615 TV. The address is P.O. Box 1777, Castle Rock, Colorado 80104. And we would be immensely appreciative. I was completely blown away and humbled by the generosity of donors to make it possible for students to go in the fall. We have another one coming up in April. And that we're underway in terms of trying to get funding for that as well, and possibly make it possible to fund a second retreat, because we're at 150% above our registration, which means we've got students that are looking to do it, but we're not to the funding point yet, and our funding level is about $4,000 for each retreat. That is our funding level. So we're at about a quarter of the way, and so anything that you feel led to invest in that would be much, much appreciated. So that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that it's been encouraging and give you some food for thought. And as always, love ya. Later.